This is Eyewitness News Up Close with Diana Williams.
Welcome back to Up Close. Today, same-sex marriage becomes legal in New York, and there is a big rush at the clerk office in New York City. Joining us now is Susan Sommer, Director of Constitutional Litigation at Lambda Legal. Thanks for coming in. We really appreciate it.
Thanks so much.
You know, New York's gay couples, despite what happened here, are still limited because of the 1996 federal law called the Defense of Marriage Act. So tell us what some of the limitations and some of the legal barriers that remain.
Sure. The Defense of Marriage Act, or DOMA, is definitely still the big fly in the ointment for same-sex couples who are marrying starting today in New York. But the DOMA bars federal rights and protections for married same-sex couples in New York and elsewhere. It is on its knees now. The Obama administration has announced its view that it's unconstitutional and is refusing to defend it in court, and hearings have already begun this past week in Congress. But so long as DOMA is in effect, it means that same-sex couples don't get the same tax treatment as other married couples. They don't get the same employment benefits from the federal government, and there's an enormous number of other ways in which they're disadvantaged at the federal level.
Yeah, one of the things you just mentioned, the tax implications. I'm reading some of the notes here. It says here the federal government considers the cost of those benefits as taxable income only for gay couples, costing such couples an average of $1,069 more a year for health coverage. If a gay man, also is an interesting part of it, a gay man or woman marries an immigrant of the same sex, there's no way to guarantee that the immigrant spouse will be able to stay in the U.S. legally. And if the spouse of a gay married couple dies, the survivor cannot get Social Security survivor benefits. These are just some of the issues here. You do see progress in that front being overturned at some point? Because it seems like that's good. Most of the states in the country are still fighting this issue.
Well, already there are a number of states that allow same-sex couples to marry, plus the District of Columbia. And with marriage happening in New York, we've just doubled the population in the United States of people who live in jurisdictions where they can marry. You just listed some of the tragic ways that DOMA disadvantages same-sex couples and, for example, tries to tear people apart in the immigration context. But it's already been recognized by our own government that DOMA is unfair and unconstitutional, and I believe it's just a matter of time before the courts or Congress take steps to bring it down. But in the meantime, it is a terrible problem for same-sex couples.
You know, it does bring up some legal questions on so many levels. This is another one I want to pursue. Some corporations have extended work benefits they give to married couples to same-sex couples. Could they now take away those benefits if the same-sex couples are living together but not married?
Well, employers don't have to provide domestic partner coverage in New York. And with marriage for same-sex couples, that will mean that married same-sex couples will have access to spousal benefits. But it would not be a good idea at all for employers to change policies they already have on domestic partner benefits. There are a lot of reasons why those remain very important benefits, particularly while there's discrimination against same-sex married couples at the federal level and in other jurisdictions that might cause problems for same-sex couples and be one obstacle for marriage.
But do all companies right now have to give same-sex couples the same rights as heterosexual married couples?
They should be doing it for the same-sex married couples who already are married in other jurisdictions and live in New York or work in New York and who are starting to get married today.
Let's talk a little bit about the New York law for a second, because opponents say the fight has just begun. Even though the law has been passed, they're not giving up. A well-founded national group that pursues freedom of religion and free speech already soliciting New Yorkers who say their civil rights will be trampled on by the new right of gay couples to marry. And they give examples of town clerks who choose to resign rather than issue license to gay couples because it's against their religious beliefs. What legal ground are we here?
Well, in fact, I think the fight is over, and those who oppose marriage rights in New York lost it. The legislature, acting under legislative powers that are well settled, enacted marriage legislation last month. The governor signed it into law. Some years ago, we attempted in court to get the right to marry declared under the state constitution, and the court turned us down but said that's because it's a question for the legislature. We already have our high court in New York saying it's up to the legislature. If the legislature chooses to give marriage rights, that's the law. And that's what we saw just happen. I think what we're going to see starting today and in the future is not conflict over this issue. There are plenty of clerks, vendors, participants in the wedding industry more than happy to serve married same-sex couples, to do business with them, and I really don't expect to see conflict.
But if you have someone, a vendor, you know, let's say a photographer who says, you know what, because of religious beliefs, I'm not going to provide this service, and then someone decides to make a point, they could say, you know what, I want to sue you for discrimination. Is the photographer protected in any way, or is this a real concern for them?
Well, I don't think that's a likely scenario because the chances of a couple finding the one photographer out there not happy to get the money and do the business is really unlikely, and for that couple to just not turn to a different photographer to take their pictures. But in fact, New York has non-discrimination provisions that apply even-handedly if you are a public business, a business doing commerce in the state. You have to live by the same rules as everyone else, and you can't discriminate on bases including sexual orientation.
So from a legal perspective and historic perspective, do you feel the battle is won and you can move on? I mean, in New York, yes, to a certain degree, I imagine. Nationally, no.
That's right. I think in New York, the battle is won. We're going to see many happy couples getting married beginning today and getting far more legal protections than they had before. But where the battle is not over is in making sure that same right is available nationwide in other states, and to make sure that the federal government no longer discriminates against married same-sex couples.
Well, thanks again for making time for us this morning.
Thank you.
Coming up close, we're going to look at the economic